Hi everybody, I'm Mr. Hassan, and today we're here with the fourth installment of our flipped classroom. We're going to be covering lesson 3.4, compare and order integers, in our textbooks and our practice books, so you will need both books. We're going to be working on page 109 in our textbooks. We're starting on page 109 in our textbooks, and page 55 in our practice books. I'm going to refocus the camera and we'll be on our textbooks. I'll see you in a minute. Okay, so here we are on lesson 3.4, compare and order rational numbers, on page 109 in our textbooks. We'll read from the top. Essential question: how can you compare and order rational numbers? Connect. You have used a number line to compare and order integers. You can also use a number line to compare other rational numbers, including decimals and fractions. Unlock the problem. The table shows the average December temperatures in 5 U.S. cities. Which city has the greater average December temperature, Indianapolis or Boise? So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to just make a mark next to Indianapolis. I'm going to make a mark next to Boise so that I know which two cities I'm looking at. Indianapolis, Indiana has a temperature of negative 0.6 degrees Celsius. And Boise, Idaho has a temperature of negative 1 degree Celsius. So, the textbook's going to walk us through two different ways to solve this problem. We're going to look at the first way first, one way. So one way says use a number line. Graph the temperatures for Indianapolis and for Boise. So let's take a look at Boise first, since that comes first on our number line. Negative 1. That's going to be nice and easy. We can just put our mark there at negative 1. And I'm going to label this B for Boise. Indianapolis. Indianapolis has a temperature of negative 0 and 6/10. Well, I know negative 0 and 6/10 falls between negative 1 and 0. The problem is, I'm not really sure what my intervals stand for between 0 and 1. So let's count. Let's see how many intervals we have here. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 intervals. So each one of these is going to stand for 1/5. Unfortunately, it looks like we're working with decimals here. So I have to convert 1/5 to a decimal. And the way that I do that is I write 1/5 as a fraction, and then I'm just going to convert this to a division problem by bringing my 1 down into my house and adding 3 zeros. 5 goes into 1, 0 times. Bring up my decimal point. 5 goes into 10 2 times. 2 times 5 is 10. And there I go. So each interval is going to stand for 2/10. So this first one here is going to be 0 and 2/10. The second one is going to be 0 and 4/10. The third one will be 0 and 6/10. And this last one will be 0 and 8/10. So it looks like Indianapolis is going to be 0 and 6/10, which is this mark right here. And I'm going to label that with an I. Alright, let's see what we have below our number line here. Think. As you move to the blank on a horizontal number line, the numbers become greater. Well, in order for numbers to become greater, I've got to move to the right. Negative 0 and 6/10 is to the right of negative 1. So the city whose temperature is further to the right is, well, that's going to be 0 and 6/10 is Indianapolis. 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 All right, I'm going to slide my book up here and we'll look at another way. Alright, another way. Use place value to compare the decimals. Step 1. Write the temperatures with their decimal points lined up. And I just kicked the camera, knocked it all out askew. There we go. Alright, another way. Use place value to compare the decimals. Step 1. Write the temperatures with their decimal points lined up. Well, let's write the temperature for Indianapolis first. Indianapolis is negative 0 and 6/10. And Boise is going to be negative 1. And as we know, anytime we have a whole number, we could add a decimal point and put as many zeros as we want after it. Step 2, compare the digits in the ones place. If the number is negative, include a negative sign with the digits, which we did. Think, 0 is blank, then negative 1. Well, that's greater than. Negative 0 and 6/10 is blank, then negative 1. Well, that's greater than. Because it's closer to 0. Negative 0 and 6/10 degrees Celsius is blank, then negative 1 degree Celsius, greater than. So, blank has a greater average December temperature than blank. Well, that's Indianapolis. Has a greater average December temperature than Boise. All right, I'm going to turn the page. I'll see you guys in a minute. All right, so here we are on page 110. Let's look at the top. Example 1. The elevations of objects found at a dig site are recorded in the table. Which object was found at a lower elevation, the fossil of the shell or the fossil of the fish? Well, let's take a look. I'm going to make a little mark here at fish, and I'm going to make a little mark at shell so I know which I'm looking at on our table, or on our table. The fish, the elevation was found at negative 3 1/4 feet, and the shell was found at negative 3 1/2 feet. So one way, use a number line. Graph the elevations for the fossil of the shell and the fossil of the fish. So let's do that. Fossil of the fish was negative 3 1/4. Well, I know that's going to fall between negative 3 and negative 4, about 1/4 of the way. So let's count our intervals and see how many we have. 1, 2, 3, 4. We've got 4 intervals. That's perfect because each one of these is going to stand for 1/4. So we'll have 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, and then 4 would be 4/4. All right, so it says that the fish was at negative 3 1/4. That's going to be right here. And I'm going to label that with an F. And the shell was at negative 3 1/2. That's going to be the next line. 2/4 equals 1/2. So I'm going to mark that with an S. I'm going to make a little line to it. It's getting hard to see in there. For shell. S for shell. Let's look at what they have written here in blue. Think. As you move blank on a vertical number line, the numbers become less. Well, numbers get worth less as we move down on a vertical number line. Therefore, 3 1/2, negative 3 1/2 is blank negative 3 1/4 on the number line. Well, it's lower. It's also less than. All right, I'm going to slide the book up here and we'll look at another way to solve this problem. There we go. Another way. Step 1. Write the elevations with a common denominator. So they give us negative 3 1/2 equals negative 3 and blank over blank. They also give us negative 3 1/4 equals negative 3 and blank over blank. So we need to look at our two denominators, 2 and 4. Is there a common denominator between 2 and 4 that you can think of? Absolutely. The common denominator is going to be 4. So the nice part is I really don't have to do anything to this fraction. I can bring my numerator over. For this fraction, 2 how many times do we have to multiply 2 to get it to 4? Well, that's times 2. To get 1, or to get our numerator converted, we also have to multiply that by 2. So 1 times 2 is going to be 2. So now I've got negative 3 and 2/4 and negative 3 and 1/4. Step 2, since the whole numbers are the same, you only need to compare the fractions. If the number is negative, include a negative sign with the fractions. Negative 2/4 is blank, then negative 1/4. That's less than. So negative 3 and 1/2 is less than negative 3 and 1/4. So the fossil of the blank was found at a lower elevation than the fossil of the blank. Well, the fossil of the shell was worthless, so that, not worthless, shells are very beautiful. It wasn't worth less, but it was found at a lower elevation, so it's less than. The fossil of the shell was found at a lower elevation than the fossil of the fish. Let's take a look at example number 2 as I slide the book up. All right, example number 2. Compare negative 0 and 1/10 and negative 4/5. Convert to all fractions or to all decimals. Well, I guess we're going to do fractions first. So negative 0 and 1/10 equals negative 1/10, or 1/10. And negative 4/5 equals a negative something over 10. Well, it looks like they've already converted this fraction so that we're going to deal with like denominators. Here we've got 1/10, and we're going to convert this one so that we also are working in tenths. In order to do that, what do I have to do to my 5? To multiply it by 2. So I'm going to do the same to my numerator, multiply that by 2. 4 times 2 is 8. So I've got negative 8/10. Negative 8 is blank, then negative 1, less than. So negative 4/5 is less than negative 0 and 1/10. Use a number line to check your answer. All right, so let's check our answers with a number line. Here is negative 4/5. Here's negative 1/10, because that's 1/10. So I'm guessing their mark is saying that there's something here. And if we look, negative 4/5 is certainly less than negative 1/10 because negative 1/10 is so much closer to our 0. All right, let's convert to decimals. Let's convert to decimals. So here, negative 0 and 1/10 is already in decimal form, so we don't have to do anything to that. Negative 4/5, well, how are we going to convert that into a decimal? I'll do my work down here. So I've got 4/5. I'm going to draw my house, bring my 4 down, and add my 3 zeros. 5 goes into 4, 0 times, bring my decimal up. 5 goes into 40, 8 times 5 is 40. 40 minus 40 is 0, so that means it's equal to negative 0 and 8/10. Negative 0 and 8/10 is blank, then negative 0 and 1/10, that's less than. So negative 4/5 is less than 0 and 1/10. All right, that wraps up the lesson portion of lesson 3.4. I'm going to move over to page 111. I'll see you guys in a minute. Okay, so here we are on page 111 in our textbooks. Let's read through some of these and see if we can't figure them out. Show and share. Compare the numbers. Write less than or greater than. Number 1 says negative 0 and 3/10 blank 0 and 2/10. In the blue writing it says, think, negative 0 and 3/10 is to the blank of 0 and 2/10 on the number line. That's left. So negative 3/10, negative 0 and 3/10 is less than 0 and 2/10. So I'm going to fill in less than. Let's look at number 2. Number 2 says 1/3 blank negative 2/5. Well, here we've got a positive number and we're comparing it with a negative number. I don't even have to look at my fractions. I know that a positive number is always going to be greater than a negative number. Let's look at number 3. Number 3 says negative 0 and 8/10 and negative 0 and 5/10. Well, both of these numbers fall between 0 and 1, 0 and negative 1. Which one of these numbers is going to be closer to 0? Well, negative 0 and 5/10 is closer to 0. So negative 0 and 8/10 is less than negative 0 and 5/10. Number 4, negative 3/4 is blank negative 0 and 7/10. Now, unfortunately, I can't compare these because they're not in the same form. They're not both in decimal form. They're not both in fraction form. So I have to decide, do I want to turn a decimal into a fraction, or do I want to turn my fraction into a decimal? I always choose fraction to decimal. And the reason that I do that is because once I turn negative 0 and 7/10 into a fraction, then I have to take that fraction and find denominators that are the same. But if I just take my fraction and turn my fraction into a decimal, I can compare those two decimals. So it's less steps, it's more efficient, so I typically choose to convert my fractions to decimals. So let's do that. Let's convert 3/4 to a decimal by putting 3 inside of our house, adding a decimal, and 3 zeros. Looks like I'm running off the page here, so I'll slide it over so we can see. Alright, 4 goes into 3 0 times. Bring up my decimal. 4 goes into 30. How many times? That's right, 7. 7 times 4 is 28. 30 minus 28 is 2. Bring down my 0. 4 goes into 20. How many times? Oh boy, this is a tough one. I think it's 5. 5 times 4 is 20. 20 minus 20 is 0. So I ended up with 0 and 75/100, and this is going to be a negative number. Bring down my negative sign. Which one of these numbers is further away from 0? That's negative 0 and 75/100, so that's going to be less than negative 0 and 7/10. Let's look at number 5. Number 5 says we have to order the numbers from least to greatest. So number 5 tells us we have 3 and 6/10, negative 7 and 1/10, and negative 5 and 9/10. Right away, I see that I have one positive number and two negative numbers. I'm going to take that positive number and throw it as far to the right here as I can because we want least to greatest. And I know that that positive number is going to be my greatest number. I don't even have to look at my decimal values for this one. I can just compare whole numbers. Negative 7, negative 5. Which one of those is furthest away from 0? That's going to be my negative 7 value. So negative 7.1. And the only one I'm left with is negative 5 and 9/10. Let's look at number 6. Number 6 has negative 6/7, 1/9, and negative 2/3. Do I have a positive value here? I do. My positive value is 1/9. So I know that's going to be my greatest value. Now I need to look at negative 6/7 or negative 6/7 and negative 2/3. Which one of these is going to be further away from 0? Well, there's two things I could do. I could take both of these fractions, convert them to decimals and compare them, or I could take both of these fractions, find my least common denominator, and compare them that way. I think I'm going to do least common denominator here. So my least common denominator between 7 and 3 is going to be 21. So I've got 6 over 7 equals something over 21, and that's going to be a negative value. And I've got 2/3 equals something over 21. 7 times blank gets me to 21, that's times 3. So I'm going to do 6 times 3 to get me to 18. So now I've got 18. I'm going to put a box around this to make it easier to see. Figures my box is sloppy. So again, this was 18 over 21. It's a negative number. I'll put a nice box around it so it's easy to see. And here I have 3 times 7 to get to 21. So 2 times 7 is going to be 14. Both of these values are negative. Which one of them is going to be further away from 0? That's going to be 18, negative 18 over 21. Whoop. Which is a mistake. Negative 18 over 21, the value that we want to have there is that negative 6/7. Because negative 6/7 equals negative 18 21sts. And we always want to write our answer in the way or the form that they gave it to us in the problem. Here I have 14 21st, that's negative 14 21sts. And that's going to be my middle value, negative 2/3. In my number 7 here, number 7 says that I have negative 5 1/4, negative 6 5/10, and negative 5 3/10. All three values are negative, so I'm not going to be able to just throw an answer or throw one of our values here in our greatest. Or can I? Interesting. Here I have a 5 in my whole numbers, a 6 as my whole numbers, and a 5 as my whole numbers. That 6 is going to be furthest away from 0. So I know that negative 6 5/10 is going to be my least value, because here I'm comparing two whole numbers, 5 1/4 and 5 3/10, both negatives. But this, I have negative 6 5/10. That 6 is always going to be less than that 5. That negative 6 is going to be less than the negative 5s. All right, so now I've got 5 1/4, 5 1/4, negative 5 1/4, and I also have negative 5 3/10. I can't compare these because I'm comparing decimals and fractions. So I'm going to take my fraction here of 1/4. I'm going to do my work down here. And I'm going to convert 1/4 into a decimal. 4 can't go into 1s, that's 0. 4 goes into 10 2 times. 10 minus 8 is 2, bring down my 0. 4 goes into 20, that's 5. 20 minus 20 is 0. Giving me a decimal value of 0 and 25/100ths. So this is going to be negative 5.25. Which one of these values is further away from 0? Here I have negative 5 25/100ths. Here I have negative 5 3/10. The further value away from 0 is going to be negative 5 3/10. Because that's greater than negative 5 25/100ths. I'm going to turn the page here to page 112. I'll see you guys in a minute. All right, so we're now on page 112 in our textbook. I want to see if we can answer numbers 16, 17, and 18 together. Problem solving. Elevations in miles are given for the lowest points below sea level for 4 bodies of water. Use the table for 16 through 20. All right, so let's take a look at the table here. The table has locations. It has the lowest points of locations and their actual elevations in miles. The Arctic Ocean is at its lowest point is -0 and 0.8 of a mile. Lake Superior is -1/4 of a mile. Lake Tanganyika, I think I said that right. Lake Tanganyika is -0 and 9/10, and the Red Sea is -1 and 1/3. So let's take a look at number 16. 16 says, the lowest point of which has the greater elevation, the Arctic Ocean or Lake Tanganyika? All right, let's take a look. Here's the Arctic Ocean right here, and here's Lake Tanganyika right here. The Arctic Ocean is -0 and 0.8, and Lake Tanganyika is -0 and 9/10. Which one's greater? Which one's going to be closer to 0, right? That's what we want, because we're dealing with two negative values here. We want the value that's closer to 0. That value is going to be -0 and 0.8 and the Arctic Ocean. So the Arctic Ocean has a greater elevation. Number 17, which has a lower elevation? The lowest point of Lake Superior or a point at an elevation of -2/5 miles. So Lake Superior is here at -1/4. I'm going to erase my marks on my others so that I don't get confused. So here's Lake Superior at -1/4. And the other elevation that they're giving us, they don't have a name for that, is -2/5. -2/5. So I've got -1/2 and -1/4 and -2/5. I have to compare those. So I could do this two ways. I could take -1/4 and -2/5 and find my least common multiple and find my least common denominator between the two fractions, or I could turn them both into decimals. I think I'm going to find my least common multiple and compare them that way. So I'm going to slide the book up here so I can show you my work as I bump the camera. All right, so my two fractions are -1/4 and -2/5. We have to find a least common denominator between the two. And as we all know, that's going to be 20. How do I get from 4 to 20? Multiply by 5. 1 times 5 is going to give me 5/20, and that's going to be a negative value to bring my negative value over. How do I get from 5 to 20? Well, I'm going to multiply that by 4. So I'm going to do the same to my numerator. 2 times 4 is 8, and then this is also going to be a negative value. So I've got -5/20 and -8/20. Which one of those is the lower elevation, is further away from 0? Now remember, Lake Superior was -1/4. And the other value they gave us was -2/5. Well, this value here is further away from 0, or -2/5. So that's going to be the answer to number 17. I'm going to slide the book back up. And we're going to say the point at -2/5 miles is lower. All right, number 18. List the elevations in order from least to greatest. All right. -0 and 0.8, -1/4, as we know from our work a minute ago, is going to be equal. Oh, we don't know that yet. We have to convert that to a decimal. -9/10 and -1 1/3. But we have to take our fractions and convert those to decimals. I'm going to slide my book up so I can show my work. So let's do -1/4 first. I'm going to draw my house. My 1 goes in the house, my decimal point, my 3 zeros that I add. 4 goes into 1 0 times, bring my decimal up. 4 goes into 10 2 times. 10 minus 8 is 2. Bring down my 0. 4 goes into 25 times. 5 times 4 is 20. So my value at -4th is also going to equal -0 and 25 hundredths, which I just wrote in my table. I'll slide that up in a second after I show you my work for converting -1/3. So here's -1/3. 1 goes in the house, add my 3 zeros. 3 can't go into 1, so that's a 0. Bring up my decimal. 3 goes into 10 3 times. 3 times 3 is 9. 10 minus 9 is 1. Bring down my 0. Uh-oh, I've got 10 again. Boy, I feel like I've been here before. 3 times 3 is 9. Oh man, I've got 10 again. This is one of those repeating decimals. So we're going to rewrite this as 0, 3/10 with a repeating decimal bar. So if I go back up to the top here, I can fill my values in my chart and solve number 18. So -1/3 is going to be -0 and 3/10 with a repeating decimal here. And we need to list from least to greatest. So which one is going to be furthest away from 0? Well, that's going to be Lake Tanganyika at -0 and 9/10. That's going to be our least value. So I'll put a check mark there so I know I did it. The next value is going to be the Arctic Ocean at -0 and 8/10. The next value is going to be the Red Sea at well, we have to write this as a fraction now. -1/3, followed by -1/4. All right, that concludes our lesson 3.4, compare and order integers. Get yourself prepared because we're going to have a mid-chapter or a mid-chapter quiz, a chapter 3 quiz coming up here in the next cycle of days. Also, if you're watching this over Thanksgiving, I hope you have a great Thanksgiving. And if you got a chance to go hunting for deer, I want you also to know that Mr. Hassan really likes deer jerky. Just saying. All right, have a great holiday, and I'll see you guys when you get back.